As we return to news from Canada this morning, the fallout today from one of the worst fires the country saw last summer, historic in Nova Scotia. This was the fire near Barrington Lake on the South Shore back in May. It burned for over 2 months. You'll remember scenes like these. It destroyed about 60 structures, displaced thousands from their homes, and now officials in the province have laid charges against a 22-year-old man whom they believe is responsible for causing it. Let's bring in Brett Ruskin, who has the details for us this morning. Brett?
Heather, good morning. These charges fall under the Forests Act here in Nova Scotia. So not criminal charges, but they are regulatory charges, and they do have with them stiff penalties. So the charges themselves are threefold. They have, first of all, the charge is for lighting a fire without permission on private property, also not taking reasonable steps to prevent the spread of that fire, and again, leaving a fire unattended. So each one of those charges carries with it a penalty of up to $50,000 in fines and or up to 6 months in jail. So 22-year-old Dalton Clark Stewart is the individual who has been charged with these offenses. He's a resident of the area. He lives kind of in the area where this fire began. Again, as you mentioned, 23,000 acres, 60 different structures that were burned down, all kinds of land destroyed and damaged. There was also fishing equipment, fishing gear that had fishing crews take a big hit from this fire as well. And again, it was the largest fire in Nova Scotia's history. It took 2 months to put out. Heather.
So, Brett, again, looking at those pictures, it brings it all back. I remember how extensively you were covering another of the fires in Nova Scotia, and we were talking about this around the clock as those fires just spread and became the largest in the province's history. So many people displaced. Learning that there are now charges against someone for causing some of this damage, how are people reacting?
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, there were lots of rumors around what may have happened, who may have started it, how this fire may have started. Now there's a bit more certainty, a bit more, even though we still haven't, had any convictions, there are now charges in this case. And so we're hearing different opinions from folks, including Casey Dominguez. He had his home destroyed. He is a volunteer firefighter. He was fighting these fires. Here's what he has to say about these recent charges.
I mean, it's good to, see somebody held accountable. But as far as it affecting me, it's not going to affect my day to day. It's not going to affect me. We've kind of moved past that now. We're in rebuilding mode now, and you can't, I'm not stuck in the past. Like I said, it's good to see somebody held accountable for it. But, I think there's a lot more questions to be asked other than who started the fire.
And so as for those penalties, the $50,000 in fines possible, the 6 months in jail possibly, people are a bit divided in these communities that have been affected as to whether that is sufficient and appropriate or whether that's inadequate in terms of the penalties that could be facing this individual, Dalton Clark Stewart. Now, as for the other major fire that we saw in Nova Scotia this past summer was the Upper Tantallon fire. That was the one that we saw 150 homes destroyed, about 16,000 people evacuated from their homes. It was close here to Halifax. Still no update there in any kind of charges. That investigation is still underway, as well as an overall provincial investigation as to what happened this past year to have such a bad wildfire season. Heather.
Brett, thank you very much. Brett from our newsroom there in Halifax.